A crazy week one is in the books. We move on to week two of the NFL season, and I am joined, as ever, by top right of your screen, if you're watching us now live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Mr. Drew Dinsick, coming off an exceptionally strong week one. The bottom right, in the clockwise order, Mr. Fabian Sommer, also on the Packers, and Adam Chernoff. We'll have to talk about his Colts in a second, but look, it's only week one, mate. We will bounce back. If you thought yours was bad, Adam, I had the under 45 in the Packers and Vikings, so, you can't be that bad. Let's take a couple of takeaways from week one. Obviously, we don't want to overreact, but Drew Dinsick, you had a good one, mate. Come on, tell us about it.
Yeah. Don't give yourself too hard of a time about that under 45. Both teams stayed under 45, isn't that? That's not how that works. Wait, did both? No, I think both teams did stay under 45.
Just
yeah. No, that was a fun game, and realistically, it's always nice when you have a specific angle that you think is going to be the differentiating factor, and then it manifests. So that was as good a result and as fun a bet as I'm going to have all season, probably. The major takeaway, though, realistically for me, and we'll get into this more when we talk about Seahawks Patriots, but I thought the coaching upgrade for the Seahawks was pretty meaningful. And then across the rest of the league, there was a lot of coaching question marks. So, a number of teams who you thought, hey, maybe they made the right moves in terms of roster construction. All they need is, a plus EV coaching decisions, and it just didn't manifest. And it's going to hold a lot of teams back this year. And there were a decent number of cluster injuries to keep an eye on. I'm going to do my best, at least through this first quarter of the season, to avoid betting on teams that have cluster injuries, because some of the replacement level players that you're seeing on the field really have no business on an NFL field, and that could be what breaks some of these teams here early in the season.
Suma, your first week on the Matchbook betting podcast, had a couple of winners. In general, how did it go for you? Is there any kind of takeaway, that you saw week one that would kind of affect your betting heading into week two?
Generally speaking, not. But what I found very interesting, what I saw today, someone tweeted it, we had like 100 holding penalties less than last week. So last season in week one. Completely crazy. I didn't even realize it when watching the games on Sunday and Monday. I didn't have a clue. And then I don't know who it was, but we had like 18 or 20 holding penalties at all in the whole week in 16 games, which was completely crazy to me. I don't know why. I don't think that tackles are suddenly not holding anymore. I just think that referees just didn't call them in week one. Don't know what's happening there. Something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, of course, the refs didn't have much of a preseason either. There was very few meetings, very few training sessions for others. Adam, I touched on the top, the Colts. If you looked at all those metrics, first downs, yardage, efficiency, Phillip Rivers passing yards, first of all, how did the Colts not win? And secondly, how did they not cover? It was just disbelief watching that game.
Sully, they didn't punt.
Yeah, I forgot about that one, yeah.
14th team in NFL history, so going back almost 60 years, to put up 400-plus yards, not punt, and lose the game. They lost by 7. So, yeah, a lot to take away from that, but I think a lot of positives to take away from what I saw from the Colts offensively, too.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Colts in a bit. So if you're listening to this podcast, if you do want to skip ahead, we are covering the Saints against the Raiders. We're covering the Patriots, Seahawks, the Vikings, Colts, Panthers, and Bucs. And, of course, we're doing a few other bets as well and best bets to wrap up the show. Right, let's move on, gentlemen. First game, we're going to cover the Saints and the Raiders. It's the Raiders in Las Vegas. It's going to be so weird, no crowd in Las Vegas. The one place we would actually want a bit of a crowd is in Las Vegas on Monday night. And let's have a look at the current betting at Matchbook. Saints, they're at 1.46 on the money line. The Raiders at 3.0. 5.5 is the main point spread. The Raiders getting the start of 5.5 at 1.96, and 50 is the total. Drew Dinsick, I'll start with you here first. There's been a lot of money for the Saints early in the week here at Matchbook. Brought that line from -4.5 to -5.5 currently. Even with a Michael Thomas injury, that doesn't seem to be coming back with the Raiders. What are you thinking here? Is it a justifiable move on the Saints, or are you thinking otherwise?
No, I'm thinking otherwise. This is I personally am in on the Raiders at 6.5 and 6, and I still see value at 5.5. The look ahead we were expecting here was Saints -4.5. You could have bet Saints -4.5. You could have laid that price all summer. This market has been open for a long time. And we saw what happened week 1. We saw a relatively clean and crisp Raiders offense. We saw a Raiders defense that has a lot to grow, a lot to improve, plenty of room to improve there. Some weaknesses, mostly in the deep passing game. And I thought from the Saints, we saw an underwhelming performance against the Bucs that the final score really did not tell the tale of that game, were it not for Brady setting them up with 7 free points in that one. I don't know that is as convincing a win for the New Orleans Saints, and realistically, Drew Brees' ability to attack down the field is kind of the only thing that that really could hurt you if you're the Raiders. And he doesn't have those throws in his arsenal anymore. And then on top of all this, you're taking Michael Thomas away. So I'm very confused by this. You're saying we saw an underwhelming performance from the Saints. The Raiders at least met, if not exceeded, expectations to a degree. Michael Thomas is out of this game, and yet there was a 2-point surcharge on the look-ahead line here. None of those things made sense to me. I think the Raiders are absolutely live in this game. When we break it down in terms of strengths for the Raiders, their offensive line was superlative. I think they are one of the stronger and more competent units across the entire NFL, and that's all you really need in order to get above average performance out of Derek Carr. I concede that the coverage for the Saints is strong. Carr is going to have to be very, very accurate in order to move the ball and generate enough points to win this game. But the pass rush for New Orleans was not especially impressive, and they're going up against a unit that's better than them. So I think Carr is going to have all time to pick apart this team. And Jacobs has some, young, fresh legs that can put this win away if they can get a lead in the second half. Drew Brees still has a long way to go to get up to, kind of the form we usually expect to see from him. Of my quarterback grades, Drew Brees was in the bottom 5 of all quarterbacks in week 1, which is, is surprising to me. So it's going to be an interesting first 4 weeks here as the Saints kind of try to get into regular season form. And this is going to be a tougher test than people realize. And on top of all this, they have the Packers on deck, and to some degree, maybe looking ahead to that game a bit, as this is going to be a short week for them.
Adam, Drew definitely ain't buying this move on the Saints. Are you?
I don't think I'm buying either side here. Game, I'm sort of feel like the line is in the realm of reasonable. I think the thing that sort of concerns me for Oakland is obviously a much more difficult test against the Saints defense. Last week, they put up 34 points, had some decent yardage numbers to support that, but Carr had all day to throw in the pocket. Carolina generated just 3 defensive pressures the entire game. And Carolina also gave up 158 yards after the catch. So that was 66% of Derek Carr's yardage came after the catch was completed. So it shows me that Carolina tackling, which we'll probably get to in that Buccaneers game, might be a bit of an issue going forward. But the Saints finished last week 10th in coverage grade, 6th in tackling grade. So it's a significant step up for the Raiders. But like Drew said, there's still limitations with Brees that I think are showing through. He had the lowest completed air yards of any QB in the opening week. He was 9% below his expected completion rate, and he was 1 for 6 with a 39 passer rating when he was faced with pressure. So we'll see if the Raiders can generate more pressure than they did against Carolina. They generated just 6 all game. So we'll have to see if the Raiders can find the pass rush. But Oakland, the thing that sort of scares me here, they're tackling. They missed 16 tackles last week. That was the second most in the NFL. And I'm thinking that while the Saints last year, they lose Drew Brees, and there was this big issue of how are they going to come up and put together an offensive game plan. They bring in Bridgewater and they win 4, 5, 6 in a row, whatever it was. Yep. So if you're facing this Raiders defense that really struggles tackling, and now Kamara's back healthy, that screen game, that running game, the elusiveness some of these skill players have, it worries me just a little bit, but a price that I think is probably reasonably fair, but not a side I'm getting involved with either way.
Suma, we look at the likes of Michael Thomas, and I don't think it can be overstated. We don't obviously want to get too much panicked when skilled players go down. It shouldn't shift the points that much, but he's such a massive target for Brees. Are you, like Drew, in this one, are you surprised that the line is going this way with the Saints?
Not exactly. I make the number -4 without Michael Thomas. I agree with Adam that there is no value on either side currently to me.
Okay.
But I also agree with Drew that 6.5 is a very solid bet. So I basically agree with both guys. I think that even though they don't have Michael Thomas, I think that the Saints should still be able to move the ball. Great matchup in the trenches with their offensive line against the very soft and light Raiders front seven. That secondary of Las Vegas doesn't scare me one bit. So I think Jared Cook, Emmanuel Sanders, Kamara in space, like Adam mentioned, they shouldn't have a lot of issues moving the ball. And on the other side, Derek Carr looked extremely good last week, but it was the Panthers defense. I think they're going to get some more trouble against this Saints front seven. I think the Raiders lost Trent Brown like after 3 snaps last week, and the Panthers couldn't even get any pressure on those backup tackles. So I think this is going to be a different scenario this time with Cameron Jordan on that side. I would say the Saints are going to move the ball, but without Michael Thomas at the current number, not really any value for me.
Suma, say this line gets to 6.5. So currently, and there's a bit of margin in this market. This is fairly early in the week. We're recording this on Wednesday. If it gets to 6.5, I say maybe 1.9, or minus 110, that kind of way along. Is that a play for you if it gets there with the Raiders?
Probably, yes.
Okay, that's good to know. All right, well, it's 5.5 currently, but again, watch this space. Right, gentlemen, let's move on to the late game on Sunday night. And, it was obviously going to be a bit strange watching the Patriots last week with no Tom Brady, but they looked pretty different, running the ball. Never ran the ball so much. Cam Newton had 15 rushing attempts, the most ever for a Patriots quarterback. Current betting here at Matchbook, 2.79, the New England Patriots on the money line. The Seattle Seahawks just there at under 1.51. The main point spread, the Seahawks are laying 4 there at 1.98. And the total is 45, opened at 44. Drew, I'm going to stay with you in the leadoff spot once again here, mate. I alluded to the top with the Patriots looking exceptionally different, but watching the Seahawks, their play calling was so aggressive. This is a brand new venture for the Seahawks, being so aggressive, passing the ball early. What are you making of them in this one?
Yeah, so this is, again, the last game we just talked about was one where I did not agree with the adjustment from the look-ahead market, whereas this one is one I do agree with. We expected to see this open up Seattle -3. It opens up 3.5. I bet some 3.5. I like 4 at 1.98. And I think, I wrestled with whether or not to pull the trigger on this because to a degree, I'm wary that I have so many scars from Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer over the years, making minus EV decisions from the coaching standpoint. And they're going up against one of the tougher pass defenses in the league. And there's a chance that they look at the tape and they look at the Patriots and they're like, well, we can't beat them by passing, so we're going to establish the run in this game, right? And they roll back into sort of their 2018, 2019 form, in which case I made a bad bet. The Seahawks are going to have a very, very tough time winning the game if they go back to sort of the conservative approach. But from everything I can tell, from all of the quotes we've heard, from all of the feedback they're getting this week, even, it seems like this is not a speculative or fake kind of a head fake in terms of what the Seahawks intend to be this season offensively. It seems like Russell Wilson has, kind of earned his seat at the table in terms of dictating the style of play for this offense. It seems like, they are listening and buying into it overall in that organization. And if they are aggressive in the passing game, I think that the Seahawks are going to be able to put scoreboard pressure on this Patriots team that, even though you saw some interesting things from Cam Newton, especially in the running game, it was a very one-dimensional offense. There really was, little to any expectation of explosive plays in the passing game, especially.
But Drew, can I just ask on that one? Because
sure.
I'm almost, it's almost like a buyer beware one though on the Patriots, because we've discussed in the past how they've used the first game or two as a preseason field. Is there a possibility that they're just holding a lot of stuff back offensively?
I would say there's a chance. I think it's small though. I think Cam Newton's ability to throw the ball deep downfield is in his rearview mirror. I don't know that he has the arm in terms of strength or accuracy. I don't think his deep ball is accurate enough. And their passing, the weapons in their passing game are extremely unimpressive. The wide receivers were unable to get much separation downfield against a very not a weak secondary for Miami, but a secondary that hasn't played a lot of snaps together and certainly, didn't have all of their assignments figured out. So I think that overall the Patriots offense has a very low ceiling in terms of their capability to go score for score if the Seahawks are putting serious pressure on this team. And, to the degree that the Patriots defense looked great, I think I would put that almost equally on the fact that the Miami offense looked like they had no idea what they wanted to do. There was a very, very little that you could put together in terms of the scheming and the type of the vision that the offense had for the Dolphins that would suggest that that was even a fair test for the Patriots defense. And this is going to be an entirely more difficult test for them, especially with the way that the weapons in the passing game have emerged for the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks put pressure on these guys early and often to score. And I don't have any confidence at all that Cam Newton's going to be able to throw his way back into this game if they are playing from behind.
Suma, maybe you can make the case for the Patriots here in this one. Can you? One thing I just want to bring up as well before I get into it, the total open of 44, obviously is a very key number in the NFL. It's moved up to 45. I'm looking at the Patriots this year almost a bit similar to the Ravens in the last couple of years where they're burning so much clock. And we saw it in week 1 where you hardly even saw these guys if you were watching Red Zone. The game flew through. It was finished about maybe 35 minutes before every other game. The halftime came as well. There's a lot of clock being burned. The Patriots could potentially be a good under team, especially in these first few weeks. Any thoughts on this?
Very good point. The only thing that interests me one bit in this game is the under. Not strong enough to make it a play, but that would be the only way I would look at this game, because what the Patriots did last week was they stayed in big nickel and big dime almost entirely the whole game. They had one linebacker on the field all the time, 3 safeties, sometimes 4 safeties, I think. And I think that Pete Carroll already mentioned that they are going to lean more towards the run this week. Don't know if he's being serious. I don't know.
As opposed to passing that they didn't, yeah.
Yes, yes. And maybe they look at the tape and say, oh, the Patriots are coming out very light, lots of defensive backs on the field. Let's just run the ball. That's what we are going to do. And so that would probably one angle to look at that game. And on the other side, the Patriots will struggle to put up points in the passing game. Very good secondary from the Seahawks. Jamal Adams is an absolute beast. They might put Adams on Julian Edelman in the slot. So I think the Patriots are going to be very run heavy. They will struggle to move the ball through the air. And on the other side, like I said, the Seahawks might look to be a little bit more run heavy, expose that light front 7, get the run game going, which eats up a lot of the clock. And that could shape up for a solid underplay. But it's not really the greatest number in the world to go out and fire on the under.
Yeah, well, look, the way I'm thinking of this, though, if that total does even get up to 46, 47, a Patriots team total under, if you get to that key number 21, 21 and a half, that might be a way of looking at it. But we'll come back to that in a second. Adam Chernoff, what are you thinking with this one? Because, I mean, we looked at the Patriots in week 1, and there's just so many different unknowns with Cam coming in there. But the Seahawks, they did impress, albeit against a Falcons secondary that wouldn't hold even Mitch Trubisky to 20 points.
So I think that's a topic for another one. I think we learned more about New England than we did any other team in week 1. And my suspicion coming into the season, based on how they were constructing the roster, some of the moves that they made in terms of switching players between the practice roster and bringing people in, was that there were going to be a lot of parallels between the 2020 New England offense that we're going to see and the 2015 Carolina Panthers offense, where Cam won the MVP. And the personnel makeup in terms of what New England has is almost identical to what Cam had in 2015. And now we're seeing that the scheme is being built completely around his skill sets. And however healthy he is or might be, we're seeing that he's willing to put his body on the line in that regard. He leads the team in carries. He leads the team in rush yards. He had 2 rushing TDs. There were 5 guys on the team with at least 5 carries. There were a lot of zone reads, pre-snap motion. It's a very difficult team to defend, and a team that you don't know necessarily what these guys in New England can put together because we haven't seen them do this ever before. So it's a tricky game plan perspective from the defensive coordinator side, because how much do you lean into what you saw with Cam in 2015 and how much is there unknown because there's just no tape on this offense whatsoever. And there were so many guys getting used in the ground game that it was just very efficient and difficult to stop. And when Cam had to pass, play action passing was used more than 50% of the time, and he was pretty effective in throwing the football through the air. So obviously much more difficult challenge potentially against Seattle in terms of the opposing secondary. Dolphins secondary is quite good. But the thing that sort of intrigues me here is the Seahawks pass rush is the one glaring weakness on this team. So if they're not able to generate a lot of pressure against this Patriots offensive line and the O-line for New England can sort of bully them around, I think there's time for this offense to be flexible both ways. And then on the other side, huge step up in class for Seattle in terms of the opposing defense. Last week, 12 of 14 for 108. Russ was passing on first down with 2 touchdowns. 15 for 25 of the first half plays were passes to start the game, and he had a 91% completion rate from a clean pocket. Carroll said it was a reflection of how they were practicing in the offseason and training camp. But like Suma mentioned, there's some hints that maybe there's going to be a little more run this week, depending on the scheme that's on the opposing side. So it'll be interesting to see how Seattle manages that game plan. But from a price perspective, here's what's interesting. I looked last week, and we don't know necessarily what home field's exactly worth. I think there's a consensus agreement that it's much less. It's been 1.7 the last 5 years. Let's say it's a point, right? Last week, Seattle was -3 against Atlanta. If you're giving the Falcons a point for home field, you're saying that, yeah, Seattle's about 4 points better than the Falcons. Strong disagreement with that. But now we're essentially at the exact same point with Seattle's a 4-point favorite at home against the Patriots, right? So we're essentially rating the Patriots and the Falcons on the same level week to week against the Seahawks team. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. And that gap in terms of what I saw from New England is probably larger relative to Atlanta in terms of New England being rated higher than Atlanta. So I don't know if I necessarily agree with that and how much of this price might be sort of a reflection of what we saw from Seattle and the upside they present when they're passing. But to me, that's an interesting sort of price point to think about when you look at how much disagreement there was last week in favor of the Falcons against the Seahawks team at the price they were at. So maybe some New England money comes in, not too sure, but something to think about for sure.
Drew Dinsick, you wanted to come back there, man?
Yeah, a brief counter on the Patriots offense. You know who has seen the 2015 Panthers? It was Pete Carroll. You know who defended the 2015 Panthers relatively well? It was Pete Carroll. They do have, and really all I need in order to be interested in laying the points with Seattle is for plan A to go in favor of Seattle defense, right? I want some, punts early for New England, in an inability for them to kind of get into a groove. And to force them on their heels, make an adjustment, and ask them to do something that they don't want to do. Like that really sets up, I think, quite well for the Seahawks to get this cover. And if Carroll's experience going up against Cam Newton when he was a much more effective downfield passer, if that, his experience defending him in those situations has like a little bit of a blueprint to stymie Cam and the Patriots, early, then I think you can set yourself up well here, because I just don't love this Patriots team coming from behind at all.
Yeah, they just don't look like they're built to catch up. And I mean, look, there's a hell of a lot of narratives going around that, Josh McDaniels got these new toys to play with or whatever. But like you said, Drew, he's getting a pretty older and more of a banged up Cam Newton. He still obviously looks really good as a runner, but how long can they really ring that bell cow for? I would have major doubts as well. Drew, you kind of sold me on Seattle there. I like it. The other guys tried to put me off a bit, but I think there might be a play there with Seattle. We will discuss later on the show. Right, let's move on. Next game, Minnesota Vikings at the Indianapolis Colts. Oh, but those Colts. 1.66. You can back the Colts at the money line at the moment here. Matchbook, 2.39 the Vikings. The Colts are laying 3 at 1.96. This opened as well at 3, I think. No, -2.5. Small bit of a money there for the Colts. And the total is 48.5. There's been a lot of money. I know a few of you gentlemen are already on this at 46 from listening to your content. Who am I going to start with here? Adam, let's talk about the Colts. Would you be comfortable laying 3 for the Phillip Rivers-led Colts at the moment? like we said at the top, Adam, hell of a lot of good metrics. Every other game, they probably win that one.
Well, I still don't know how they didn't end up winning that game. And people are going to point to Phillip Rivers throwing these timely interceptions, but they're going to ignore the other 36 passes that he completed where he was throwing with the same aggression and a lot of the exact same routes on where he threw these interceptions. And one of the interceptions was 4th and 3. Do you want him to take the sack so we can complain about him like Derek Carr in the game a couple of years ago where he took that sack on 4th down and everyone thought he was just ridiculous for doing so? Like it's so timely how everyone always has this Rivers narrative, but then when he's making the same throws the rest of the game, we're going to ignore those because we want to get likes and retweets on social media. It just, I watched that whole game start to finish, suffered through it. They got stopped inside the 7-yard line twice, which was a big turning point, especially when they had the chance to go up 14-0. Rivers in that offense, they were getting the ball out quick. The receivers were running wide open wherever they wanted. And certainly part of that was the Jacksonville defense. I'll get to that in a second, but like it just looked really, really good. And Jonathan Taylor, the speed that he brings is now going to be full display. The Marlon Mack injury was unfortunate, but I really like what he can bring out of the backfield for this team. Where this gets awfully interesting was I don't see how the Vikings put forth much of a better defensive effort than what the Jaguars put on this Colts team last week. Rodgers, 1.75 seconds to throw in the first half, 4.4 average depth of target. Like he had 5 passes that were more than 15 yards downfield to put up huge numbers. But for the most part, this was just avoiding the safety duo and picking on these very young corners, trying to learn a very difficult Mike Zimmer system. And Rodgers was just taking whatever he wanted all game. It's a very similar look that the Colts are going to throw at them with 3 wide receivers, with Phillip Rivers getting the ball out of his hand quickly, had the second quickest release time last week of any quarterback for the full game. It's going to be the exact same look for what the Colts want. Their offensive line has an extra week of rest. They get a little bit healthier. I think there'll be more resemblance of a ground game with Taylor that they can utilize more than they were unable to do so with the injury to Mack. But at the same time, when Rivers is throwing for 9.5 yards per pass, like, do you even want to run the football? So I don't see the Vikings putting forth much more of a defensive effort than the Jags did. And I think Rivers can potentially have more time too. The Vikings had 0 pass rush whatsoever because the entire defensive line is being rebuilt too. Just a 9% pressure rate. But Zimmer and this defense, they want to bring the pressure. So they blitzed at the 3rd highest pressure rate, but generated the 3rd lowest rate of pressure on the opposing quarterback. When you're blitzing that often 40+% of the time, you want a pressure rate greater than 9%. And they just couldn't generate it. I don't know what they do this week. Big issue that people might point to in this handicap, the Colts defensively. Matt Eberflus came out after the game. He said, we did a great job on defense. We just broke in a couple situations rather than just bending. But the defensive line was great. They had the lowest blitz rate, but the 3rd highest pressure rate. So essentially the inverse of Minnesota. Colts didn't have to bring extra guys, and they were getting a ton of pressure on Minshew. They only had 4 missed tackles the entire game, and they only conceded 3.9 yards per rush and gave up 241 total yards. 15 of 20 passes for Minshew were within 5 yards past the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. He only threw 4 passes the whole game, 10 yards or more downfield. One was a blown coverage that turned into a touchdown. But with this cover 2 system that Eberflus wants to play with the Colts, like, this is what you're going to get from them. Everything's going to be in front. Was not impressed whatsoever with the Minnesota passing offense. They put up some garbage time numbers, but I think this is Colts -3, and I feel very good about it because there's just so much disagreement with what the Colts can do, and I don't think that's reflective of the team at all.
And it's important too, as better as Adam, that you're obviously frustrated on a personal level too with the Colts. So obviously, we don't get too frustrated in this game. We're at it long enough to not. But like, it's important not to jump off the bandwagon. If you see a team that performs well this week or whatever, and they did burn you the week previous, but this just seems like a really, really good spot for the Colts as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly not wavering from the Colts. I had them rated high, one of my top 5 teams coming into the season. Maybe I was slightly aggressive, but against this Vikings team, which I downgraded in my ratings more than any other team from last week after seeing the performances, it's a no-brainer for me at -3.
Suma, both these defenses last week looked poor enough, especially the Vikings. They looked absolutely atrocious for a team that have put a good defense on the field for the last couple of years. That move on the total was a very significant one, driving up through that key number of 47. Even 48.5. Now it's getting a bit steep, Suma, but it's hard to make a case for even an under here, isn't it?
Yeah, I can only agree. I can only agree with everything he just said. I think it was Steven Ruiz, very good tape guy, so to speak, and he said Philip Rivers had a top 3 passing performance last week. That might be a little bit too much, but it really shows that Rivers was not the issue, just because he had 2 weird interceptions. The move on the over, and I think Mr. Dinsick got a very good number on that. I can only agree with the move, not anything that I want to get involved with, because the number has arrived a very major territory, so to speak.
This is what happens, Sumo, when people on Sunday night, like Drew and Andy, are ruining it for the rest of us. So we only get up on Monday morning in Europe and it's gone. Dead.
Yes. Exactly.
Someone was going to do it. Might as well have been us, right?
Why not us?
But yeah, I think Frank Reich and Philip Rivers, they will find enough ways to attack that very young and inexperienced secondary. The Colts offense looked very creative last week too. They used some reverse stuff, lots of motion. I really think they should be able to move the ball. Maybe they can jump a lead, put Kirk Cousins on his heels, and I think he should also find some success against the Colts secondary. But the Vikings are a complete run-first team. They want to establish the run. I don't think Mike Zimmer is just going away from his philosophy. And that offensive line will struggle against that Colts front 7. We saw what the Packers did to the Vikings offensive line last Sunday. We talked about that last Wednesday on the podcast. I think we are going to see the exact same scene this week. Kenny Clark was out at halftime for the Packers, and that was kind of an advantage for the Vikings in the second half. But this time they're going to play against Justin Houston, DeForest Buckner, very good linebackers. So I don't think the Vikes are going to get their run game going, and they will be forced to throw at some point. And I think Kirk Cousins is going to make some more mistakes than Philip Rivers. So complete agree.
Drew, we already know your thoughts on this total, but even from a side perspective here, would you be in agreement with Adam that this is a good spot for the Colts, and the way the number is trending, it might get back down to 2.5 and stay under that key 3?
So we thought and looked hard at both of these openers. It was Colts -2 when they opened it on Sunday as well. -2.5.
2.5.
That's, if you can get under a 3 and you have an edge, then fire away on that as well. But I couldn't pull the trigger. I couldn't get in bed with the Colts, and it had nothing to do with Rivers. It had nothing to do with their offense. Their offense was exceeded my expectations. But the fact that you conceded 27 points to the Jaguars, the fact that you concede these points even without giving up, these big, downfield passing throws, and the fact that the Vikings offensively, I know that you're playing prevent with Green Bay, but it wasn't. Those were not necessarily true garbage time drives, in my opinion. They did some pretty, effectual things in terms of how they schemed their comeback. That all that kind of still has whiffs of this being a score for score kind of game. If the Colts manifest a 2-score lead at some point in this one, or maybe if they're up 2 touchdowns, it's probably over, right? Like they can ramp up their pass rush, either by utilizing more blitz or just winning their 1v1, and they can salt away the win with the running game, which is quite strong. But they need a 2-score lead, and I'm not 100% sure I can buy in on the idea that the Vikings aren't going to be able to answer every time the Colts put together a nice drive. The secondary for the Colts, I think, is still a problem. They didn't really address this effectively in the offseason. In fact, they brought in one of my least favorite players across the entire league in Xavier Rhodes. I would expect the Vikings probably have him red circled on every piece of tape they're showing this week. And guys like Thielen and Olabisi Johnson and even Justin Jefferson, they all looked solid against a very decent secondary for the Green Bay Packers. So I think the Vikings are going to be able to answer here. That's why I ended up going with the over instead of playing the Colts. And I just think the idea that this can be a back and forth scoring game makes it a little bit more of a coin flip in terms of, can the Colts avoid the key turnover this time? Can they convert their fourth down conversions this time? Like, it's going to take those things to break in their favor, I feel like, to avoid a rerun of what we saw last weekend.
So, Drew, just on this, so obviously we touched on it there that you were obviously at your machine late on Sunday night and backing 46. People watching this on Wednesday and Thursday, it's 48.5 now. And the 47, 48 are obviously very key numbers with totals. Is there value? Is still a smidgen of value there? Or is it kind of just one of those ones like Suma touching? If you miss it, you miss it, and just move on and leave it be?
No, I do still think there's value. I can see we enter the fourth quarter tied 24-24 type of game here. The things that would worry me or concern me in terms of playing an over here are bad breaks in terms of fourth down conversions, poor red zone execution. Then you can't really control those sort of things. And I would guess that with the defenses that are going to be taking the field on Sunday, that those aren't things that you're first order concerned about. So fair price for me on this one for a total is 50. So I got about a 1.5 edge still to the over even here at 48.5.
Just join us on the side too. Come on, just go for it.
I do. I think there's probably one or two plays here for us, maybe probably the side. And look, I think there could be 2.5 there. Just looking at the way the market is kind of forming at the moment, there could still be about a 2.5. You'd actually go down and pay a bit for it. A Matchbook obviously being such a key number, but it should be there, and it maybe will be there. Okay, let's move on from that. So I think of all the games we've covered so far, that's the third game we've covered. It probably is. We could probably take a pick from the side there and a total, I would suggest, even no, and just leave it kind of be at that. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a second when we do a recap. Right, let's move on. Suma, I want to come to you here with Tom Brady and the Bucs. It's going to be a good talk. And when we said it last week that the Buccaneers are going to be a bit of a public team, especially early on in the season, and there's been a bit of a move here early in the week. The Bucs opened at a flat 8. It's 9.5 now. And the total is 47.5, and that opened at 48.5. It's come down a bit. Suma, were you one of the backers at -8? Have you pushed this line to -9.5? Tell me.
Monday morning, I was making my numbers for the week, and I came up with Buccaneers in the -10, maybe -10.5 range. And then I checked the odds screen, and I was kind of surprised that the number was -7.5 and -8 in some places. I think this is kind of a recency bias thing from last week, because the Panthers looked a lot better than we expected before the season. The Buccaneers lost against the Saints with some bad Brady interceptions, but I don't really agree with that, because the Bucs played maybe the best team in the NFC on the road. Tom Brady had a pick 6. They had a muffed punt that set up the Saints into field goal range. That was likely a 10-point swing. And I think the Bucs also missed a field goal. Tom Brady got the 8th highest passing grade from Pro Football Focus in week 1. They had some miscommunication issues with their wide receivers. Mike Evans had a bad hamstring. He wasn't at 100%. And so I just think that this game set up a crazy narrative that the Bucs aren't as good. But I think there's no reason to downgrade them at all. And I think there's no reason to upgrade the Panthers after last week. They just look good against a below average Raiders team with a bad defense. And going into this week, I think the Panthers are going to struggle to put up points against Tampa Bay. The Bucs had the best run defense by DVOA last year, and they held the Saints, I think, to like -0.46 EPA per rush. So this a very good front seven. Big kudos to Todd Bowles, who is a very good defensive coordinator. I think Christian McCaffrey, who saw a lot of action last week, will struggle to run on that front. That puts Teddy Bridgewater in a lot of uncomfortable spots.
They held him big time last year in both those games, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. McCaffrey was a non-factor.
Yeah. So it's really just Teddy Bridgewater who likes to throw the ball shortly behind the line of scrimmage without a lot of help from the run game. And on the other side, the Panthers defense is a bottom 5 unit in my eyes. And Derek Carr had I think 0.47 EPA per play last week. That would be 0.15 higher than the career average of Patrick Mahomes. So the Panthers secondary really made Derek Carr look very, very good. And I think they will also make Tom Brady look very good. I don't think they have anything to respond to Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, to Gronkowski and O.J. Howard. I don't think that they will generate a lot of pressure when they couldn't generate pressure against a third-string tackle last week on the Vegas side. So I laid the points at -8, -0.5, I think. Number is -9.5. That would still be a play for me because I make that number -10. And I think the Bucs are going to win very comfortably in this one.
Drew, I think you'd agree with me that if we opposed Suma every week, we would be in the poorhouse long ago. However, on this one, we talked about Tom Brady last week. We watched that first drive where he marched down the field and got a touchdown. I was like, whoa, okay, maybe. Hold on a second. But then the rest of the game pretty much played out the way you kind of thought it would on last week's show.
Yeah, a lot of my preseason thoughts on the Bucs were a little buyer beware because and really this goes back to the day Tom Brady was signed. My gut reaction was this is not a great fit. I don't love, everyone's pointing to, oh, Brady's got weapons now, like, oh, he's gonna be amazing this year. Like where Evans and Godwin, where they really thrive is creating separation down the field, creating separation along the sidelines. Like those guys are an absolute disaster to try to cover if you don't have an elite cornerback because they can get a yard or two separation. And it's been a long, long time since I have seen Brady make precision passes down the sidelines, which could exploit what would be their overall, advantage in the passing game. His game has matured to the point where it is a lot more, quick release, middle of the field, within inside 10 yards. And to that degree, he's a little bit more predictable and not as good a fit with the weapons they have. You could see the timing issues I felt like manifest pretty clearly in one of those 2 interceptions. You could see that, there was just a general, there's going to be a general learning curve before this Tampa Bay offense, I feel like, reaches their full potential. In terms of this specific matchup, there were things that kept me off of the Bucs, and namely the Bucs. That if you are going to really, punish the Panthers, a lot of it you're going to have to do it on the ground. And to a degree, the Tampa Bay rushing attack is still a long way from league average, let alone elite. And so it's almost like they should be able to bury these guys. This should be a lopsided contest, but it's just not quite the right fit in terms of matchup, in terms of where you want to attack the Panthers and where the Bucs' strength is, where the weapons for the Bucs exceed, and what Tom Brady is capable of. And so all of these things together, I think we're going to look at the box score at the end of the day and be like, man, like they got everything they wanted in this game. How did they only get to like 24 points, right? Something like that is, I think, what our major takeaway from this game will be. But I totally agree with the fact that Todd Bowles in this Tampa Bay defense is better than people realized. I think he did a really nice job coordinating against that Saints team. And, to the degree that I want to go back a little bit and kind of, temper my, some of my downgrade of the Saints offense and say, maybe that was the Bucs defense playing well. And we know that the Bucs can stop the run more effectively than almost every other team in the NFL. They are absolutely superlative in that regard. And I think it is going to be a long day for the Panthers and their offense. So I'm not going to run to the window to back the Bucs, but I am pretty concerned about them meeting their offensive potential, especially early in the season until they gain a little bit more of an identity.
Adam Chernoff, on a level of 1 to 10, how comfortable would you be laying 9.5 with this Bucs team at the moment?
Well, I didn't do anything, but I leaned Tampa Bay before I leaned Carolina. And like, for anyone watching this on their phone or listening in the car or whatever, just take a second and stop and ask, is the gap between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers the same as the gap between the Chiefs and the Chargers, or the Steelers and the Broncos? Because essentially we're seeing the same price, or in that same region, for all three of these games. And I would say that the gap between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Carolina Panthers is significantly larger than those other two, which is why I was surprised to see the price open where it was, and whether that's overreaction to week one or just a complete misrating of Tampa Bay. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that, but like, I would think that this would have been, or should have been, 10 at a minimum. And I'm surprised it's not there. I think if it does get through the 10, then there's certainly more room for this to go up. But like, I look at this and say, if there's a game where the Buccaneers need to figure it out on offense, like Carolina is the opponent you want to do it against. And I mean, this defense is so young. There was so much turnover. It showed at every single part of the game against the Raiders. 10% pressure rate. They generated pressure just 3 times on Derek Carr the entire game. That was the second lowest amount of pressures in week one. They gave up the 4th most yards after the catch. They missed the 2nd most tackles of any team. They finished with the worst run defense grade and the 6th worst tackling grade overall. And just so many issues within the secondary that probably get exposed a little bit more when there's a quarterback on the other side that might be willing to throw it more than 3.5 yards per play down the field in terms of depth of target. So, like, it's just, if there's a game where Tampa Bay is going to click and get it right and work things out, like, this is certainly the game to do it. And I find it interesting that this was a Bucs team, again, a 9.5 win team preseason. Panthers were at 5, and then you're looking at like an 11 versus an 8 and a 9 versus an 8. We're all seeing the price in the same range. Like, it's difficult for me to either downgrade Tampa Bay that much and upgrade Carolina that much last week, and then do the same thing with the other two teams, albeit this is always the opponent dependent, right? That'll obviously impact the number a lot, but like, we're just, from a price standpoint, it doesn't quite click for me. So I'm surprised this is at double digits, and it'll probably get there before kick.
Well, it's actually minus 9.5 currently at 2.0, which is even money in fractional terms at the moment. So it seems to be trending a small bit with Carolina. So I must admit, a small bit surprised with that. But look, you guys are the experts, and I will back you blindly as ever. But look, again, we touched on it at the top. Do not overreact to week one, and this line may be an overreaction to the Saints win there. We did say last week, we did flag it, that this was probably a very, very good spot, a favorite spot for the Saints against the Bucs. Better the devil you know, and all that. Right. Let's talk about a few other bets. Drew, you had mentioned in our WhatsApp group earlier on the week there was a couple of unsexy games, so to speak, ones that we probably won't even watch. But where are we going to make the money elsewhere, do you think? You've muted yourself, Drew. I'll unmute yourself. There you go. That can happen. Week 2.
I played. It happens every time. Every time. Week 2. The unsexiest game of the week is probably Buffalo Miami. This is a rerun, in my opinion, of what we saw with Patriots Miami last week. The way that Buffalo is constituted roster wise in terms of strengths, weaknesses, very, very similar, in my opinion, to the Patriots. They're not like a perfect carbon copy, but they are extremely similar. And Miami really didn't show us that they have a vision offensively that is, current competitive in the NFL. Ryan Fitzpatrick is in the waning cycle of the Ryan Fitzpatrick life cycle. And it usually takes him several games to kind of come out of that and show us anything competent. So I'm fine on the under here. I'm at 43, which was the opener, which just seems insane in hindsight. It's down to 41 and 42 across the board here. So I think there's still value. I think this closes at 40 and a half. And then this, the other under I have with my eyes on is the Washington football team versus the Arizona Cardinals. This has taken a ton of money to the over. It was a decent under spot on the opener, I thought. So I am dying to hear anyone make a case for why this is an overlook. The Washington football team defense was as good as advertised. They were as good as advertised in week 1, I thought. And the Washington offense is, 31st, 32nd best in the NFL, maybe tied bottom with the Miami Dolphins. So I think, and to be honest, the Arizona's defense was going up against a cluster injury riddled San Francisco team. So at wide receiver, so maybe there's a little bit of bias there, but overall, I thought they improved quite a bit from what we saw last season. So this one to me is surprisingly high at 48 now at Pinnacle. So.
All right, let me just cut you off for a second. Adam Chernoff, make the case for the opposite in the desert on Sunday night. You liking a points aplenty?
Yeah, so I'll push the Insights article up at
Please, yes, do, yeah.
Everyone should be reading that if you're watching the video.
Yeah.
I had many strong opinions preseason coming in, but 2 of my opinions were that Arizona was going to be the fastest team in the NFL and the first sub 25 second snap to snap team since the Philadelphia Eagles in 2015. They ran no huddle north of 40%. They played 24 seconds snap to snap. The game against the 49ers had almost 140 plays. It was the highest mark of the week. They played extremely quick the entire game. Washington, very highly rated because of their front 7 and that defense. If you're going to negate a pass rush from a schematic standpoint, you want a mobile quarterback and you want to play with a lot of pace. So Arizona has both of those, arguably the highest pace and the most mobile quarterback in the NFL. So it's a perfect fit. And then you get this Washington secondary, which is horrendous. And so I think there's plenty of advantage for Arizona to take advantage of those secondary players. Other side, my other opinion was that Haskins is not nearly as bad as he gets credit for or as he is labeled. I'm not trying to make a case that he's an above average quarterback in the league, but I think he's probably in that bottom tier. He has weapons in terms of speed outside. He's going to have a lot more time against this Arizona Cardinals defensive front, and he's going to face the secondary as well. That's problematic. But while there's pace discussion from the Arizona side, what doesn't really get messaged is from the offseason, all of training camp, Ron Rivera was pushing pace for the Washington Redskins because there's a pretty strong correlation to Haskins' best performances throughout his career and using up-tempo offense. Scott Turner, new offensive coordinator, early September when they released Peterson, he said they were doing it because they wanted a modern up-tempo offense to operate out of. We didn't necessarily see that against the Eagles just because of how that game sort of came together. But against the Cardinals, a much less efficient pass rush going to give him more time. I think we see a lot more creativity and the secondary wide open. So I look at both of these teams as over teams, especially in this spot. So I think that total was certainly low. I like the over. And for anyone who read the article, you got a pretty good number on that too.
And never let it be said that we always agree on the Matchbook NFL betting podcast. There used to be the days of Brad Allen, Drew Dinsick, where we would always disagree. So we have a bit more of a balance, but good to see a bit of disagreement there nonetheless. Suma, anything else outside of the best bets that may just pique your interest at current prices?
Yeah, this will also be my insights column for tomorrow. But
don't give it away. Don't give it away. So no, I'm kidding. Go for it. Not everyone reads it, so go for it.
I think we are not going to see a lot of points in the 49ers-Jets game. I think the total is still very, very good to go on the under. I think that should probably be 2 to 3 points lower. And if George Kittle gets ruled out, which is a possibility, that is absolutely going to go north. The Jets are absolutely brutal and horrible on offense. They can't move the ball. Shocking. Zero creativity. I don't really see how they're going to move the ball against the Niners. But on the flip side, the Niners don't really have any wide receivers that can create separation. George Kittle is banged up, might not play next week. So they're going to lean very heavily towards their run game and to running back passes. And if there's one thing that the Jets do very well, it's defending the run. And Kyle Shanahan gets a lot of praise for his run game. But to be honest, if you look at pure efficiency numbers over the last 2 to 3 years or even the last 12 months, they aren't really that efficient running the ball. They're just running the ball very often. In terms of success rate, so EPA, positive EPA per play, they are like an average team over the last 18, 19, 20 games. And I think a lot comes in chunk plays. I think Shanahan is a genius in creating chunk plays. And that's really what drives that running game. And I think we're going to struggle running on the Jets front. And therefore, I don't expect lots of points in this game. And yeah, the under is currently, I think, sitting around 42.5 or 43. And that would still be a very strong look on the under.
Yeah, chances are the Jets may not score at all, so that would definitely help.
I would be surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I kind of think the Jets might be live.
Oh, seriously, Drew? What?
I mean, let me just make the counter argument. You tell me. I haven't played it, and I've been asking everyone in the Sharp community this, and everyone's tried to talk me out of it. But I can't help staring at this Jets number and thinking it's live. San Francisco's cluster injury at wide receiver and tight end is real. It's a problem that would lend them to make a game plan that's heavily influenced on rushing attack that is into the teeth of the Jets defense. If the Jets do one good thing when they're out on the field on Sundays, it is defend the run. And the Niners are in a terrible spot here where they are going to have to lean into the strength of the Jets defense. And I don't know, I agree with Suma that the under is a beauty here. But San Francisco's pass defense looked suspect to me. And, their pass rush was not as effective as what we saw last year. They're integrating new pieces. Obviously, the switching out DeForest Buckner and having more snaps from Armstead and Solomon Thomas did not manifest much in terms of pressure. And they've always, Adam's point about the pass rush, having a mobile quarterback to avoid the pass rush is real. But San Francisco's always had a tough time of getting home their pressure. Like they're just they're missing like that last fast step. Whereas I just don't know that the Jets aren't going to be competitive in this one.
The Jets getting 7 currently at Matchbook at 1.96. The early games kick off my time 6 p.m. I'd given up on the Jets season by about 25 past 6 on Sunday. It was that kind of way. It wasn't working for me. Right, let's just bring in a couple of comments here before we start wrapping up, guys. A lot of comments in today. Thank you for getting in touch, guys. Savage Samurai on our YouTube channel says Colts for the entire bankroll. Adam Chernoff, always gamble responsibly. Do not use your entire bankroll on the Colts. Adam likes them. I think there's maybe a consensus we like them, but do not use your entire bankroll. Always gamble responsibly. Thompson Ethan has been in touch on Periscope. Tampa Bay going to hang 30 plus points this week on the Panthers. I don't think there's a major disagreement there. Yeah. Do not think there's a major disagreement here. Another comment in here from T-Hold 42. I understand the Niners are banged up, but how did they not cover -7 against the Jets? T-Hold 42, you're looking at 3 Jets fans here, and we're not disagreeing with you here. Adam, go on quickly.
I saw an overwhelming amount of people all over that look ahead number, which was less than 6 or less than 7. It was like 6, 6.5.
Yeah.
Like there were, for as many people that are betting the 49ers this week, the market movement in their favor is certainly not reflective of the volume that some of these books are taking. So interesting to say the least.
Niners got to score more than 7 points to cover 7.
That's
true.
That's probably
tell me how they do it without 100% George Kittle. I don't know if they can do it.
Yeah, okay, fair point. One more comment there. We've got a lot of them, but I'll just get to this one. Why not just team total the Cards? Again, Adam, could you make a case for that if, you're a bit worried about Washington? But I think you made the case that you reckon Washington will get theirs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a team total guy at all, so even if I had an opinion, it might not help. But if you like that, go for it.
Okay, sounds good. Just want to do a very quick recap before we get to the last 2 sections here, guys. So we covered the Saints and Raiders, the Pats, Seahawks, Vikings, and Colts, and Panthers, and Bucs. First 2 games, I don't really think there was a massive consensus there, so let's not lock on a place. But I do believe there was a bit more confidence. And look, -2.5 of the Colts, you do have to go to 1.81 at Matchbook at the moment. But I would suggest you might get a bit of a better price closer to kick off there. So let's take -2.5 there. And 48.5 is the total. We play the over. And Suma, I have full confidence in you this week, mate. You nailed the Patriots -6.5 with Dolphins last week, so I'm going to back you here with the Bucs -9.5. Even though you're on -8, Suma, but look, the rest of us mere mortals will take the -8. I want to introduce a very quick new section here, guys. Every dog has its day. Plenty of underdogs last week, of course, winning outright. I just want very quickly one underdog this week that will not only cover, that could potentially win the game. If I was to give you one bet on each one, Drew Dinsick, give me an underdog this week. Who are we backing?
Only dog on my card this week at this point in time is the Raiders. I'll take that number. I think they can shock the Saints.
Okay, and they're currently 3.0. Suma, what are you thinking?
3.0.
Gun to my head. I'm taking the Patriots here.
Okay, Patriots. I like that one.
I don't hate that either.
Even though I actually kind of like the Seahawks early on, so I don't know where I'm going with this one. Adam exactly. Adam Chernoff, one money line underdog. What are you thinking?
Falcons around 2-1-ish, super high total, tons of points expected. Total was smashed over, so I think we just see a complete back and forth with chance for Falcons to pull it off.
That was a game we didn't get to, obviously, but how there isn't points in that game, I just don't see it. And best of luck to anyone who wants to back the under there. My thoughts are with you, even at a big number like 51 or 52 there currently is. Right, so that's those three picks, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Patriots, and that pays as a treble 15.6 at Matchbook currently. Those prices are correct at the time of recording. Chances are you'll probably get an even better price come Sunday evening.
Next bump.
Right, there you go. Match it up. Bump it up the price. It's probably going to be 18 somewhere realistically. Right, guys, while we all wait for week 2 best bets, I'm actually going to take a pass this week. I was so bad last week that I actually just going to take myself out of this game and leave it up to you three gentlemen. I don't fancy anything strong enough. Let's start at the top right of the screen. Drew Dinsick, week 2 best bet.
Man, the best bet I made was Green Bay Detroit over 46. This thing's tickling 49.5. But I'm going to go with my best bet. I'll lay the points with Green Bay. I think this cluster injury for Detroit is a real problem. I don't mind laying 6 here. I think Aaron Rodgers and company can get it done in style. The Lions are frauds.
They're frauds. Suma.
Because the Bucs have moved quite a bit already, I'm taking the under in the Jets game. I think Matchbook is at 43.
Yeah, you can get plenty of 43, flat 43 there in the Jets, yeah.
Okay, that's my bet.
Cool. Adam Chernoff.
Sticking with the Washington football team, I almost did it again, and the Arizona Cardinals over.
Wow, okay.
Rethink that one.
What number did you get there this morning on that, Adam?
The insights column was 46.5. You said right now on Matchbook it is at 48.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, just double check that. But
So
but look, there's still
that's-
plenty of 46.5. You probably have to pay for it, and obviously it's a key number of 47. there.
Find 47.
Yeah, okay.
If it's available, the second highest key number in total. So if it's higher than that, then drop down the stake. But that's a reason to read the insights column early in the morning.
There you go. Exactly. Get on that early every Wednesday morning. Right, gentlemen, we are out of time and we are done for week 2. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, we'll get you some winners this weekend. Hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, you can like and rate us on your preferred podcast app and give us a nice review, or you can follow us on Team Matchbook on our YouTube channel. See you guys next Wednesday. Take care.